Okay. We'll call the subcommittee to order on Senate File 128. It establishes a savings grant program for pupils attending non-public schools. This is a conversation that needs to continue. And one of the concerns I have about where ESAs are currently going is parents who have their children enrolled. I appreciate the governor's efforts. I am concerned about parents who have their kids currently enrolled in non-public schools are being treated differently. And this committee is about giving them an opportunity to have their voice heard. There's a lot of upside to ESAs. It fosters competition. It gives parents a choice for children who are enrolled in underfunded schools. And one of the big concerns I have are proficiency for minorities in the state of Iowa. Proficiency scores for Black and Hispanic children in the state of Iowa are failing or a low D average. When our proficiency scores are in that neighborhood that could foster potentially generational poverty, we have to get outside the box, look at other options, look at ways to raise the bar. And it's been shown, studies have shown that this type of option does indeed foster competition that raises the bar, and that's always going to be our goal. So with that, I don't know, Senator Zahn, do you have any comments you want to make?
At this time, I'll just save it till the end. Thank you.
You bet. Senator Selsey, would you like to be heard?
As always, Senator Carlin, I'm glad that you admitted that you're concerned about test scores. I am too, but it doesn't help when we only fund ESL at bare minimum or ELL and at a bare minimum level. And we're underfunding our public schools. So I don't think this will help, but I'm here to listen. Thanks.
Okay. Let's start with if there's any members of the lobby, I'd like to know your position on the bill and who you represent and who wishes to be heard on this. Okay, that's
I'm Phil Jennery with the Iowa Association of School Boards, and we are registered in opposition to the bill for several points. And we believe that public money should stay with public entities, with public schools. Another issue that we have deals with transparency and accountability. Public schools are governed by a locally elected school board. We have public audits every year. And we have open meetings and open records requests that schools are under. And if a person were able to get an ESA, go to a private school, those things, open meetings, open records aren't law for that. So where is the transparency? Where is the accountability there? Third, this really kind of is a slippery slope to a more expansive program. You've seen these in other states. Where there could be necessarily a defined voucher for specific students or whatever, and then that gradually grows and grows and grows and expands, for further eroding public education. And as you said, Senator Carlin, there are some schools that are underfunded, and we propose that instead of potentially taking more money away from those schools, we should help those schools in any way that we can. And then finally, talking about the choice conversation, we believe that there already is sufficient choice in schools today. There's open enrollment. The legislature got rid of the diversity programs last year. The legislature passed charter schools last year as well. So we feel that there is already enough choice in public education as it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I would ask of everybody, we don't want to have a situation where we have a lot of the same repetitive type comments. If you have something that has not been said. Let's give those people a chance first, and we'll just keep this moving. I'd like to see if we can get through this in a half an hour to 45 minutes. Really don't want to go beyond that. Sure, but okay.
I go first? I'll be brief. Melissa Peterson with the Iowa State Education Association. We are also registered in opposition to this bill, and I won't echo all of the comments made by my colleague from the Iowa Association of School Boards. I would just highlight, in addition, that we are serving more than 484,000 students in our public education system, and we are doing that to the best of our ability with the finite resources the state has. We think those resources need to go to support those 484,000 students, as opposed to be used to incentivize private education that is not available to our statewide population. And so we would just ask for strong consideration on that, and then echo the comments related to accountability and transparency with proposals such as these. Thank you.
We're going to do the lobby first.
Peter Hurd with the Iowa Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. Said the same statements that were said before, but also we don't want to see public education turn into a for-profit system where some of the resources that the state provides would end up going to profit and being taken away from educational opportunities for our children. Thank you.
Eric Goranson. I am a multi-client lobbyist representing the Iowa Association of Christian Schools. I appreciate your comments on taking care of current families who are sacrificing a ton right now to choose the school and the environment that best meets the needs of their child. And this bill is something we've been in favor of. We've declared in favor of it. There are the governor's bill, House versions. There's good language in each of those. And so we're really grateful that you're having the conversation. And we hope that at the end of the day, we can put them together. We agree that public options should be adequately funded and have everything they need, because frankly, the vast majority of our neighbors are going to choose their neighborhood school and we want them to succeed. We also want those parents who need something different to be empowered to have that option. And we appreciate you having that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Sunny with the Family Leader. We're in support of this bill. Thank you for bringing it forward and for having this discussion this morning. What we've seen in empirical studies is this has been tried in other states, is that this program has actually helped public schools as well as helping students. In Florida, a similar program helped special needs students as they were able to pick the school that best served their needs. We believe we should fund students, that we should let the dollars follow the student, and we appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Keenan Crow.
Remember, you got some.
Is there anybody else out there? Yeah. Keenan Crow.
Yes. Hello, Senators. Thank you for the time to speak. Keenan Crow from One Iowa. We represent LGBTQ Iowans. Last year, we conducted a comprehensive study of all accredited non-public schools in the state. Out of the 181 non-public schools that were identified as accredited in Iowa, we were able to locate the policies of 176 of them, so nearly all. And we went through each and every policy handbook line by line. What we found was shocking. 75% of Iowa's accredited non-public schools indicated in some way that they would be willing to discriminate against LGBTQ people. That was either in an explicit statement saying that they wouldn't allow LGBTQ children or the children of LGBTQ parents, or in some more subtle way, like saying that sexual immorality wouldn't be permitted, and then on some other page defining sexual immorality in ways that match LGBTQ identities. Some simply reserved the right to discriminate in the future. Only 15%, though, of accredited non-public schools actively affirmed that they would not discriminate. Now, freedom of religion is one of our most important liberties here in the U.S., which is why it's enshrined in our First Amendment. These non-public schools have every right to teach the religious principles as they see fit. However, there's nothing that obligates taxpayers to provide support for institutions that intend to permit discrimination. Iowa non-public schools have told us loud and clear what they will do if permitted to discriminate. A measly 15% have protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. So we are wholly opposed to voucher programs like the ones contained in SF128 for this this reason. Any talk of competition between these institutions and public institutions isn't a competition at all, because we're not talking about institutions that are playing by the same set of rules. Public dollars should stay at public institutions where discrimination is prohibited by law. Thanks.
Margaret Buckton. Margaret, you're muted.
Yes. Thank you. You'd think I know how to unmute by now. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Both the Urban Education Network and the Rural School Advocates of Iowa are registered opposed to this bill. And I agree with what our colleagues at ISB and ISCA and others have already stated. I just want to talk just a little bit more about that competition element. In Iowa, we have so many other parent choices available to students that if competition were improving outcomes for kids, we'd already have that effect. One of the things we have $20 million for private school tuition and school tuition organization tax credits. That's available for children from families up to 400% of the federal poverty level, or $106,000 a year for a family of 4. So those that don't have the means to go to a private school could certainly access private school through that option. When you mentioned the concern for students that are minority students or non-English speaking students, often being in underfunded schools, one thing you could do instead that would cost a whole lot less than this voucher program would be to fund the $10 million for high needs school grants that was in Governor Branstad's education reform plan that's been in your appropriations bill since 2013 and never been funded. When we talk about public money going for public schools, that's what we mean, that parents have the opportunity to choose something where they know how their own children are likely to succeed. And since you don't have transparency in private schools, a parent making that choice may not know how other children like theirs would fare in that school environment. And we know this bill is crafted as a small start to what will grow over time by including kindergartners and then have the state assume that cost not currently in the education funding pie. Since our public schools are already facing budget challenges and keeping up with inflation, and as this body contemplates tax cuts, we're just really concerned that you'll put more of this on your fiscal plate and not be able to adequately fund public schools in the future, which serve over 92% of the children in our state. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Connie Ryan.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm Connie Ryan, and I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa and Action Fund, and we are opposed to Senate File 128. We represent thousands of Iowans, people of faith and no faith, across the state who believe in our public schools, Iowans who believe in the separation of government and religion, Iowans who believe that public dollars should be spent for the collective public good, not private choices. And just to throw some more numbers out at you, 97% of accredited non-public schools in Iowa are religious institutions. We know this because they say so in their mission with clear statements on their websites and in their promotional materials. Religious institutions, by their very definition, are ministry. We also know they are religious institutions because they can legally opt out of certain laws because of that religious affiliation. Public funds should not be used for religious ministry, and it should not be diverted away from public schools, the provider of education to over 92% of Iowa's children, and it should not be given for private choices. We ask that you focus on adequate funding of our public schools that have been underfunded for a decade. If we are concerned about proficiency, then adequate funding is key for our public schools. Please oppose Senate File 128. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brian Carter.
Yes, I am Brian Carter. I am the legislative advocate lobbyist for the Iowa Conference of the United Methodist Church. We are opposed to Senate File 128. And I just wanted to speak to remind you that not all religious would support this bill, because we believe in public education. We believe every child is important and every child needs an excellent education. And we just feel that this would take money away from our public schools, which are underfunded. And once we have an excellent public education system, then you can decide some other programs. But we do oppose this program and ask you to adequately fund our public education.
Thank you, Brian. Is there anybody else from the lobby who wishes to be heard on this? Senator Guth?
Thank you. I would just like to make one comment and really appreciate you bringing this forward. I hear a lot of arguments about taxpayer dollars, or about public dollars. As far as I'm concerned, there is no such thing as a public dollar. All dollars are owned by taxpayers. And what this bill would do is put the taxpayers back in charge of some of those dollars. It's rather than there being less accountability, I would say there is being more accountability, because the people who are the parents will be making the choices for their own children. So I think this is an opportunity to both use taxpayer dollars the way taxpayers want to have them used, and an opportunity to just to make sure that public funds are used the way that the people that pay the bill want to have it paid. It's not that people are taking kids out of school that think that public school is doing a great job. I've had several constituents that have said, we can't get the public school to listen to us. This is one way that they can have their voice heard, both in the public school and by having a better choice for their own child. Thank you, senators, for doing this.
Thank you. All right.
You do have someone over here.
Doug, if you want to be heard on this.
Yes, please. Doug
Who
Campbell.
are you? Okay.
Doug Campbell, taxpayer, past school board member. And I would just say to everybody.
Where were you a school member?
Mason City Community Schools, Mason City, Iowa.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm not gonna say a lot, but Thomas Sowell, who was magna cum laude graduate from Harvard, a Nobel Prize laureate, and economist, knows what he's talking about, knows how to investigate an issue, wrote a book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies. It's a objective, data-filled assessment of the difference between charter schools in California and New York as a study cohort. And you read the book, objective assessment of what those dollars will do for students. I'll read the book for you and give you the bottom line. The top 3 performing schools in the state of New York, above everybody else, private, everybody, were charter schools. The majority of charter schools, 97% of them, outperform public schools in the same cohort. These are charter schools that are in the same neighborhood, the same building as the public school. There's 2 differences between these cohorts. The teachers were accountable and the students were accountable to behaviors and performance. And if they weren't, you know the consequences. That's the difference. There's a whole book that you can condense out of this whole thing. So if our being on the board and having fiduciary issues hidden from my sight, because we found $1.2 million in fiduciary malfeasance and misappropriation that we had to dig for. If we did not have an accountant and an auditor on our board, these things had not been found for 8 years. Just to give you an example. So as a taxpayer and a citizen, seeing these things firsthand, these are the behind the scenes things that you will never see or hear about. And that's why I'm here to speak today. Thank you very much.
Senator Celsi, you have any additional comments?
Yes, I do. I just made a couple of notes as folks were talking. And by the way, thank you all for being here today. The research, I've researched have any other professional here in the state of Iowa on balance, economic and race, private schools are no better than public schools for academic achievement. There's been dozens of studies on some find slight advantage for public, some find a slight advantage private balance. controlled for economic background, these students and their achievement level when they enter
Senator
school.
Senator, if I could interrupt you for a second. We just missed the first 20 seconds of what you said because it got all garbled. And so
Okay,
for the benefit of the committee, if you could just restate it, I'd appreciate it.
sure. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay.
To the point of research, there have been dozens of studies done on the efficacy of private schools versus public schools. On balance, controlled for economic background, and sometimes that equates also to the racial profile of the student. Private schools are no better than public schools when those things are controlled for. I've done the research. I've had folks that are way smarter than me do the research, and that's what they have found. Also, this nebulous idea of competition. There is competition in the sense that schools are always trying to keep their students learning more to achieve higher grading and math. After year, they're trying to make students better.
It's doing that
But
again.
schools are
Just give it a second to kick in. It's doing that again, Senator.
Alright.
It's chopping you up a little bit. Let's just take a second. If you stop your video and just do
Let
an
me off my
audio, that
video.
might help.
Yeah. I will.
Okay.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Okay. So there is competition in the sense that schools are always trying to help their students learn more and achieve higher scores in reading and math. That is absolutely true. Schools are already very busy meeting standards, laws, and student needs. There is not a focus on competition in the K-12 environment with other institutions, either private or public. They're simply too busy trying to get students prepared for their futures. So the idea that this private schools are creating some sort of competitive environment is not true. And as a former private school student myself, K through 12, went to private school, went to the same private school as Senator Zahn. I can tell you for sure that it is a choice. Parents are responsible for making that choice, but it's also their responsibility to pay for it and not use taxpayer dollars. And even if the voucher covered the entire cost of the school tuition, it still does not cover all the costs associated with attending a private school, which can be numerous. So I will not be signing off on this sub today, but I thank everyone for coming, and I thank my fellow senators for allowing me to give my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Selsey. Senator Zahn, do you have any comments?
I sure do. Made a lot of notes like Senator Selsey did about some of the things that were said. First of all, I would start out with, during COVID, parents had their eyes opened because they had to do a lot of online learning, and they got to see what was actually going on from a curriculum standpoint, mostly in the classrooms. Then it's been enhanced because of the book controversy and some of the garbage that's been taught to some of our kids. This bill here gives parents the choice to get out of a school that I think that's underperforming and is not why I've been so passionate about this issue over the years, is it allows every parent to pick whatever the best educational opportunity there is. And there is some very good public schools out there. There's some very bad public schools out there. But you're not going to the school based on your zip code if this bill moves forward. There's been a lot of things that have been talked about, test scores. I can tell you in the area that I represent, Urbandale Johnson Grimes, where there is public versus and there's private school opportunities, I will put any of those test scores up to any other public school test scores. They perform better. The ESL Senator Celsi brought up a good point in that. I mean, we have to have, and this happens not only in the public schools, but in the non-public schools. The ESLs are very important, and I'm hopeful that we could get more funding in that, because if these kids can't learn the English language, the chances of them being successful once they get out of school are going to be very limited. The accountability and the transparency, we've talked about that for a long time. I agree, it's not fair. I think that public schools should have the same accountability and transparency as the non-public schools. And certainly it's right now, there's a lot of paperwork. As someone that's married to a former public school teacher, there's a lot of paperwork involved. It's not fair that the public schools are requested to have more accountability versus the non-public schools. And that's something we should have a conversation about. The underfunded versus the private schools was brought up. I can tell you what we've done every year is we've increased funding, and now I think we're going to have, I don't know, 2.5% to 3% increase for the public schools. And then the for-profit companies, somebody brought that up. I can tell you, I have studied this issue for many years. There is some very successful for-profit corporations. I know the liberals hate corporations, but the fact of the matter is they do a better job of delivering the education opportunities for these kids. And the great example is what is done for a for-profit school down in Arizona for what we always talk about of the kids that, you know, they're special ed. There's schools that are set up, there's down in parents got together and formed a co-op or a for-profit company. So that's not true. The competitive environment, I'm a small business guy. I know this, and I've seen, because we always hear that, oh, public schools are going to close. I don't know, maybe just on a few occasions where there has been a public school that has closed, but when there has been these school choice bills that's passed in the United States, is that the public schools actually improve themselves because they have to compete for those kids. Studies, Senator Celsi brought up studies. There is a couple dozen studies that are out there. I have them and I'd share them with everyone here. I've looked at all of them. I can tell you I believe there was 3 of a couple dozen. I can give you the exact number, and I will be prepared when we go to, the floor when it comes to this. There is like 3 instances where they said that they disagreed, that there wasn't an increase in student performance when there was school choice out of 2 dozen. And these were independent studies that were done by universities. I know that what we did last year was a $20 million for parents, the scholarship that they could qualify based on their income level. I'm hopeful. I just want to give every parent the best opportunity for their kids. Senator Celsi brought it up that I did graduate from Dowling High School. I sent all my kids to non-public schools. That was my choice to do that. I still paid tax dollars for my public schools, but it was my choice and the sacrifices that my wife and I did to give our kids the best educational opportunities they can. And I think it should be available to every parent that's out there. So I'm ready to sign on this bill. I am excited about the conversation. The governor has made this a priority. And I thank you, Senator Carlin, for putting together this subcommittee and filing this bill.
Thank you, Senator Zahn. And I think you just hit on how this should really be defined. The best opportunity available. And parents, not government, not the state, should be the ones making that call. The presumption that the state knows what is best for a child is something that I think is very subject to reasonable question. After the whole COVID crisis that many kids endured in public schools with mask mandates that I think are questionable, and a whole lot of other issues. You mentioned the book content in libraries. Some parents don't want their little girls to share restrooms with boys. Those are legitimate concerns rooted in safety and privacy. Proficiency outcomes are a very real issue. Right now, the proficiency numbers for Black students in Iowa are failing. And that is not an ESL issue. And what has been shown to improve proficiency scores are a private school option. And that's not reasonably suspect to a legitimate challenge. They're doing better. Milwaukee County, I went to law school at Marquette. I used to live in Milwaukee County. Their parental choice program, their voucher system, the kids there on average did 10.7% better, which is a big deal. Proficiency outcomes have long-term economic implications that, will foster a better economic outlook for children. And so you want to present the best opportunity, and the parents who pay the same taxes, the income tax, the sales tax, the property tax, those parents, if they pay, and this notion that these public dollars are owned by the state, no, if you pay, you should have a say. It's called representative government. It's called a republic. Your representative voice in this conversation, because you're helping to pay the bills, should be heard. And I think the parents who want better options when there's underperforming schools, when there's failing schools, I think their concerns about their best interests, their best economic and educational outcomes for their children are in play. They're in a better place to make that decision. And I think this also fosters additional parental involvement. And to Senator Zahn's point, competition always raises the bar. And the reality is, when you have kids leaving public schools and those school districts want that money very much, if you talk to anybody in this process, they want that, they don't want to lose that money. It's going to force them to raise the bar. It's going to force them to raise proficiency scores. And really what we're talking about here is 50% of the state allocation of money. We're not talking about 100%. We're talking about half the state's allocation per student. The balance of that money stays within the educational system of the state of Iowa. So it could even have a very positive impact on the overall quality for students that are enrolled in public schools. So my inclination, obviously, is to support this, and I will be signing off on this as I think you will, Senator Zahn. With that, I believe we are adjourned.